Hey pizza viewers, welcome back to the Portuguese campaign. It's turn 10 and the Moors want a ceasefire. And I accept. Here's why. I have some recruitment facilities now, and my army is not killing my budget yet. How do you know if your army is large enough? In my opinion, it's not unless you're making your accountants sweat bullets. Not only that, I'm in a particularly defensible position. Both of my forwardmost settlements can be completely defended at the two choke points on the map, dividing the Moors from the Portuguese, which are bridges. With missile troops, you almost can't lose a bridge battle against the Moors, or pretty much any other faction. The Moors are also sitting on a giant pile of cash. If you destroy them, that's money wasted. So, you want to try to fill your treasury by the tried and true method of just straight up blackmail. Okay guys, welcome back. It's turn 11 now. I'm still working on getting my princess to the Pope. You want to avoid unnecessary marching distance to the ship, so bring your ship as close as possible. Then you can increase the agent's distance traveled over the ocean, since they didn't waste a lot of time marching. Next, if you're not recording a video and you're just campaigning for fun, try to take your time and move your ship slowly over the water. If you see an enemy or neutral ship, hit the backspace key and stop your ship's movement before you wind up in the other vessel's zone of control. It's a gigantic waste of time to have your ship stalling out in the middle of the open ocean, and it can be quite dangerous. You don't have a huge, powerful navy yet, so if you do get engaged by a pirate ship, you're going to lose that battle, and wind up sailing off in some direction but the one you want to move in, if not sunk outright. I'm going to chance it because I don't want you guys to have to wait for the sailing animation to complete, but if you're playing on your own, it's a pointless risk to take, so never under any circumstances take such a risk. Over on the home front, I claim the first bridge. Now enemy agents cannot slip past me, nor can their armies. If they want to cross the bridge, they have to engage me in a battle where I am playing defense. I don't have to cross the bridge, just hold on to it. That's a massive disadvantage to the attacker. For such a bridge battle, you want a defensive line comprised mostly of spearmen with decent shields, because although they are poor offensive troops, they are some of the most difficult troops to budge from any given spot. And if the enemy can't move them and can't march past them, they are essentially a solid wall. Behind that wall, you want missile troops such as javelin men. But here's one of the few places where I highly recommend even your worst missile unit, the Levy Archer. They don't cause a lot of casualties, but they have a ton of missiles, and can set them ablaze. And flaming arrows fired into a mass of troops is a severe blow to unit morale, and is a critical component to cause the entire enemy army to rout. Of all the battles on this campaign, this kind of battle is the one where otherwise pathetic Levy Archers perform far above their pay grade, even better than if they were defending a settlement. You can hold a bridge without flaming arrows, but if you have the option, you should always bring some archers along. Javelin men tend to run out of missiles quicker, and crossbowmen are good, but they can't set their missiles ablaze, which is really what you want to go for here. You're not about causing direct casualties, but more about causing routing. I'm going to build a church just to win the Pope's mission, and soon enough, I'm going to be converting Islamic lands to Catholicism, so I'm going to need more priests soon. That's turn 11. I'll be right back. Welcome to turn 12. Now, let's finally get that emissary to the Pope. Rather than bribe the Pope until I am penniless, I want to first get the Pope into a pleased demeanor by offering nice trade agreements and gifts, and also give him a lopsided map exchange deal. My map is quite a bit larger than his, so it benefits him to do a simple map trade. Then, a generous offer of alliance with an additional gift of money should cause relations with the Pope to become perfect, which has been my objective for a while. Once they're perfect, if I so desired, I could ask the Pope to call a crusade against any crusade target that pleases me, and make a much larger standing army that is free of upkeep. The thing is, I don't have a massive budget-breaking army yet, so this move is a little premature. The other thing is, there's not a whole lot of crusade targets that I actually want to go after right now. Most of the ones that the Pope is willing to call a crusade on are deep in Turkish territory or Egyptian territory. And I don't want to call a crusade against the Moors because I don't want to risk the Aragonese or the Leonese taking any more of their territory. So, for now, I'm just going to hold off on calling a crusade. Once I get more units, though, and I've had time to recruit more native troops, a crusade makes more sense. And I'd be adding units like Crusader Spearmen and Crusader Knights to an already powerful core army, comprised of my own native troops. I could go for the gusto and blitz my way forward recklessly, but that puts us into a high-risk situation where we have to fight a lot more battles at a disadvantage. I can do it and have done it many times before, but often enough we would have to perform some pretty cheap tricks to wear down the enemy, which are unrealistic, to say the least. So for now, I don't want any troubles with the Genoese. I am willing to agree to an alliance with the Genoese, especially because they will invariably get into a fight with another Catholic faction when they want to expand much further, and I plan on allying with the Holy Roman Empire and eventually, perhaps, France. This will allow me the option to break an alliance down the road with one of them at no diplomatic penalty to me. Once one of my allies declares war on the other, I can remain trustworthy while breaking the alliance that suits me the least. I definitely plan on demolishing the Genoese at some point, but would rather not have them trying to take Iberian lands from me while I'm engaged elsewhere. Besides, the more Catholic factions that are allied to me and trust me, the better my reputation. I'm only really interested in diplomacy so far as it suits my conquest goals, which means things like ceasefire agreements, which would profit me greatly, and alliances which hold long enough for me to conquer up to their border, and then vanish promptly when I decide it's best for me to cancel the alliance. I don't intend to make anyone in Western Europe a permanent ally of mine, because they're all in my way. At most, I'd want to make one of them my vassal, and then relocate them to a more distant territory that I then conquer, such as Ireland or Scotland, for example. That's far enough away from my capital to have pretty steep penalties in terms of corruption, and far enough away from Central Europe to be of little use to me in the long term, especially in terms of unit production. I don't intend to waste a ton of time and money improving those parts of the British Isles, so when I conquer them, I plan on gifting them away to a vassal if I have one, which means that I can actually turn a tidy profit from holding those distant lands, since they will be governed by a vassal of mine, with a capital located much more closely, and the vassal will owe me any money that they're not using after a certain amount. Yes, I really am planning that far ahead. That's the long term, but my immediate tactical situation demands more units. I've moved much of my army onto the bridge, but I'm waiting for more units to arrive. Meanwhile, I'm going to try to increase the rate at which certain settlements grow by governing them with my king and with my prince. When a governor has a decent chivalry rating, that attracts more of the peasants and travelers from the country to relocate inside the settlement, and be governed and protected by a noble lord which is a benign and trustworthy leader. At least that's how I justify increased population growth inside settlements which have a chivalrous governor. I'm also going to accept a proposal of marriage to one of my princesses. I could use another general, and my immediate diplomatic needs have already been met. The guy is named Tomas Tavares, and he will assist me in building a defensive fort by the other bridge, which I will then fill with peasant infantry. I don't really care about the fort itself, but I don't have a decent army to protect that bridge. The fort can act as a lure which the enemy will attack first before they attempt to cross the bridge. That will give me more time to defend the castle nearby, which is all I'm really concerned with. Plus, it should give me time to muster an army at the bridge if I have enough units nearby. The Moors will now have difficulty invading me from the northern bridge, and they will face the full might of my main army if they are stupid enough to attack me at the southern bridge. I should be so lucky, right? Well, leave it to the AI to recklessly charge their armies at anything that it believes it can destroy in a straight fight. If my army is smaller than theirs, they will still attempt to cross the bridge and defeat me. That sort of overconfidence is their undoing. If you're trying to calculate the odds of taking a bridge, just imagine that the total strength of the enemy army holding the bridge is doubled, and that you won't be able to successfully flank them or exhaust them to death either. Unless something catastrophic happens, even the AI should be able to successfully defend itself in a bridge battle. That's why you don't want to be the attacker unless absolutely necessary. Alright, I'll see you on the next turn. Hey guys, welcome back. It is now turn 13. A nice harmless alliance with the Polish should improve my reputation. Trading maps with them is also a good idea, since I can then sell them off later for some quick cash to the highest bidder. This should also boost the charm of my princess. Eventually, I want to try to steal a governor or general of a rival faction which has the right stuff. If the worst happens and I lose the princess, oh well. My main concern is that I get male heirs to my prince, so I can have the direct line of male heirs, one king after another. That way I can more easily improve the traits of my line of kings. The distant relations, in-laws, and adopted nobles, I couldn't really care any less about. If they don't have children, that's the same thing as losing a princess. The other thing to remember is that if the rest of their noble relations are having children, your prince is less and less likely to produce an heir of his own. It would seem that if the burden of carrying on the family bloodline is an urgent priority for your prince, then he will be much more determined to pursue that particular goal, shall we say. Apologies for being so graphic about that. Hey, you have to learn about the birds and the bees sometime. You see, when royal mommies and daddies love each other very much, and the rest of their brothers and sisters and distant cousins have been ruthlessly denied the opportunity to have children by a powerful and malevolent overlord, they do a special hug that causes male heirs to the throne to appear. And if they don't appear, there may be some combination of beheadings, tossing children into wells, and or reloading until the evil overlord gets the male children he wants, and anyone who objects gets burned at the stake. Didn't they teach you guys that in health class? I'm pretty sure it was in the back of the textbook somewhere. Now, if you'll notice, my prince is administratively minded. That means he is likely to develop beneficial traits when governing a settlement. He's already got a tax farmer, which boosts his tax collection skill. I'm going to raise the tax rate to the point where the public order rating is near 100% or lower. That's the rate at which peasants are being taxed so much that they're starting to become malcontents. When you leave your governor inside a settlement under those circumstances, if I remember correctly, he's likely to gain better traits along the tax collector line, which means I can put him in a major trade hub city and crank up the tax rate and see my treasury fill a lot faster. Have I mentioned that I like money today? When it comes to governing a faction in this game, oh yes I do, because I like fielding massive, expensive armies. But you gotta come up with the funds first. The next thing I want to do is ensure that the troops I produce from my castle at Oporto manage to make it all the way to the front lines. I don't have enough generals to simply escort my troops anywhere, so in order to avoid my own troops rebelling against me, I will be making yet another fort halfway between Oporto and Seville. This will also serve as a rallying point between Seville, Oporto, Silves, and Lisbon. One fort within one turn's marching distance from 4 settlements is an excellent investment, and that way you can muster all of those troops and put them into a single stack in a single move, and prevent any of them from being deserters. As some of your cheaper common units take casualties, they become excellent fort fodder. These forts have no real strategic importance, so maintaining a garrison inside them is unnecessary. You can put a single depleted cheap unit inside of it, and it will maintain the fort for you and prevent it from disappearing when it isn't in use anymore. And they can do that for much less than even the cost of a unit of peasants. Money, money, money. It's all about money. Still using my diplomat down here as a scout, to get an idea of the troop levels inside of the Moorish territories. This way, I know where the enemy is massing troops to attack me with, and which settlements are almost completely undefended. Predictably, the Moors will not have many troops in Africa, especially on the eastern side of their territory, where they have a decent castle. This is an exposed weak point, and the territories nearby have no relief forces, and they can't recruit the kind of troops they would really need to put up a fight at this early stage. That means that the Moors' Achilles' heel is actually Algeria in this specific situation. It's worth it to me to invade Algeria, take the castle, and conquer them along their exposed and defenseless interior. Their garrisons in the center of their territory can then either sit there and wait for me to conquer half of the Moorish lands, or move to intercept, leaving their core territories vulnerable. No matter what the Moors do, they're at a disadvantage. Alright, that's it for this turn, so I'll see you on the next one. Hey guys, welcome back. It is now turn 14. All on his own, His Holiness the Pope has decided that Muslims need to die. I was actually hoping to wait a little longer and call a crusade myself, but I'm also prepared for this situation. I'm not going to ignore this opportunity. I have no immediate plans to conquer Cairo, so any units I put on crusade will actually get tragically distracted along the way to Cairo and be forced to defend Moorish territories that I conquer. Just so you're aware, during the first 10 turns or so of a crusade, you can, if you so choose, just faff around and move in any direction that pleases you, as long as the general in command of that army has just joined the crusade that turn. That leaves it wide open for some abuse, because you can either leave the crusade and rejoin it, or you can just send the troops in the wrong direction and put them under the command of a different general who joins the crusade that turn. So if you have enough generals, or are just willing to leave and join the crusade in the same turn, you can march your armies backwards, or even cause them to stand perfectly still for several turns while you're still on a crusade, without losing any troops to desertion. The alternative, if you want to be a little less cheap about abusing the crusade mechanic for your own evil purposes, is to join the crusade and move as slowly as allowable toward the target until someone else conquers it, and then zip back on a ship. That way you're technically following the rules of the crusade, and still using it for your own means. I could do that instead, but it will prolong this campaign by several turns. How many additional turns and hours of gameplay would that add to the campaign? Too many for me to be interested in doing so in this Let's Play. If you want an even longer campaign experience, I could do one, but I'm kind of worried you guys will be bored out of your minds as it is. You're just here for the battles, right? Well, I want to raise a massive army and give you some battles as soon as possible, so permit me a little crusade abuse. It's all perfectly legal anyway. Now, did you guys notice those delightful mercenary spearmen units available to be hired? There's also some Andalusian spearmen, and both of which are superior to any spears that you can produce right now. So hire those up very soon. Also, Crusader Spearmen and Crusader Knights are a welcome addition to any crusading army. These guys are ridiculously expensive when not on crusade. So, if you can't afford them after the crusade is over, then you should just use them as shock infantry and shock cavalry. You can take as many casualties as you need to, because you're only going to delete the unit later on anyway, so if you take casualties, what are you really losing out on? These aren't your troops, because you're going to delete them. I also want to, on this turn, do a permanent alliance with the Holy Roman Empire. And by that I mean a real, actual, lasting alliance. I have no wish to conquer their territory within the first 100 or so turns of this campaign, most likely. They are far enough from me and are a large enough political entity that it's actually worth it to me to make a lasting peace with them. I'm going to use that to my advantage. It increases the perceived strength of my faction to the world, and improves my trustworthiness, since what I'll end up doing is I'll have a very long-lasting alliance with a faction that I know won't be conquered randomly. Now, what I plan to do with my crusading army is put it under the command of the general that I care the least about, someone who is only an in-law relation, which would be General Tomas. Right now, that guy is fairly useless to me as a governor, and I want my prince and king located closer to home, for defense and mustering another army. Since he's fairly young, has no really negative traits, and is extremely loyal to me since he married my daughter, he's the ideal candidate to lead the first invasion. He won't be bribed, he won't rebel, and he'll win enough battles over time to become one of my top generals. If the worst should somehow happen, and I lose him in a battle, then boo frickin' who. He's barely a member of my royal house anyway, and I don't particularly care if he has any children of his own. That's pretty much it for turn 14. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this up, and I'll see you again on turn number 15. This is it. We're at turn 15. Yes, I'm still mustering my forces and rallying them to wage war. This preparative process is when you are actually winning the war. You want to plan it out and begin the war with a sudden attack and hold a massive advantage over your rivals. Then it is far more difficult for the enemy to hold their position or even battle it out to a draw. To use an analogy, it's like in chess. You win the game by putting your pieces into the proper position where they can bring you victory. The actual act of checkmating the enemy, and therefore claiming the win, comes later. In this campaign, you'll see that the objective is the same. I create my chess pieces, so to speak, and then move them into position before I strike. The actual declared war is typically over pretty shortly after that. Long story short, you want to win the undeclared war. Then you can fight one openly and win it with crushing results. Now, I am assembling General Tomas's army. As this is going to be an offensive or invasion force, I want to have spearmen to hold a line and to use as a free garrison in the settlements I take, but I also want to have javelin infantry to kill generals and other units that pester me, and javelin cavalry. The reason for this is as follows. On a long campaign, each man with javelins is going to end up killing a large number of enemy men. With each successful throw of a javelin, that one man has probably and almost certainly killed an enemy soldier. If this happens twice or 3 times in a single battle, the javelin-wielding soldier will have killed 3 times as many enemy soldiers as it took for me to muster onto the battlefield. Now, these units will be engaging in multiple battles, conquering many territories. Even if I were to somehow end up on a prolonged and difficult campaign, where I lost soldiers every single battle, these particular types of soldiers will cause massive enemy casualties. I'll be trading 3 men for every 1 that I bring into battle, and that's just for starters. With such units, I could cause casualties of like 10 to 1 or better. Those are what I call conquering ratios. Spearmen and levy archers can inflict damage, but they are more like defensive units, better used in defending a bridge, just as a non-random example. So they won't be killing quite as many units, and they make a less effective invasion force. They're more for holding territory. I'm going to bring along a unit of mercenary spearmen in my invasion army to deny the Leonese a chance to recruit him. And there's also going to be a unit of mailed knights added to this particular army. Tomas is now ready to kick some Tomas. I'll have him build a watchtower since I don't have a spy keeping an eye on the Moors. I'll also move my peasant infantry forward in case I need to use them for public order of conquered territories or as emergency reinforcements. They'll do no good sitting deep in my territory. My prince, meanwhile, will focus for now on improving Silves and getting it growing. Lisbon is already a decent territory and trade hub, but improving Silves to the point where it is basically another Lisbon is a really good use for a chivalrous governor like my prince. Let's expand Oporto by building a farm. Remember I told you guys how slow this castle would grow? I'm not even making it a priority of mine anymore, since I've conquered better settlements than what I started with. Eventually, I plan to move my capital elsewhere. At this point, I could actually produce some spies. Finally. Normally, I'd already have at least one, if not for that inquisitor I ran into. Of note, as I move my princess around, the Pope has actually conquered a province in Italy. That means... Sometimes it means that the Papal States will actually attempt to be an aggressive faction rather than perfectly passive. I believe you'll even see papal armies on a crusade. The Pope himself may even personally lead a crusading army. That will be amusing. He might even leave Rome undefended, but I wouldn't count on it. In the meantime, I've noticed that by moving my diplomat around, the Moors have very few units sitting in Africa. And this is a continuation of what I noticed in the previous turns. So, even as turns go by, they still haven't improved their situation any, and I've got a crusading army heading right for them. So, very shortly, we will see the Moors take a dive. I'll see you on the next turn.